For decades, military planners believed that the side with the most sophisticated air defense systems would dominate the skies. Massive radar arrays scanned hundreds of kilometers into the distance. Long-range missiles waited to destroy enemy aircraft before they ever reached their targets. Nations invested billions in integrated defensive networks built on a simple assumption: expensive technology would always defeat cheaper weapons. That assumption is now being challenged. Across modern battlefields, aircraft worth tens of millions are no longer the only threat. Increasingly, militaries are confronting something far smaller, far cheaper, and far more difficult to stop. Long-range drones built from commercial components, lightweight composite materials, and increasingly autonomous navigation systems are forcing some of the world's most advanced air defense networks into an uncomfortable position. The challenge isn't simply technological. It's mathematical. Every interceptor missile launched costs money, manpower, and industrial capacity. Every radar must cover thousands of square kilometers. Every battery can only protect a limited number of locations at the same time. The attacker, meanwhile, can often build another drone for a fraction of the defender's cost. This imbalance is changing how militaries think about defense itself. Today's story isn't simply about Russia or Ukraine. It's about a transformation that could influence every major military in the world. The conflict merely provides one of the clearest demonstrations of a much larger shift: the transition from an era dominated by expensive platforms to one increasingly shaped by low-cost autonomous systems. The real question is no longer whether advanced missile systems can destroy drones. The question is whether they can afford to. Cold War air defense doctrine emerged during an entirely different technological era. Military planners expected hostile bombers to fly high above the battlefield. Cruise missiles traveled along relatively predictable routes. Ballistic missiles followed trajectories that powerful early warning radars could detect from great distances. Everything about those defensive systems reflected those expectations. Large phased array radars searched vast volumes of airspace for fast-moving aircraft with substantial radar signatures. Sophisticated engagement radars then tracked those targets before guiding interceptor missiles towards them. Against aircraft and traditional missiles, this architecture proved remarkably effective. Against modern drones, however, the problem looks very different. Unlike fighter aircraft built from large metal structures, many long-range drones rely heavily on composite materials including fiberglass, carbon fiber, and lightweight polymers. These materials naturally reflect far less radar energy than conventional military aircraft. Size compounds the problem. A drone with a wingspan measured in only a few meters presents a dramatically smaller radar signature than a combat aircraft. Even when detected, distinguishing that return from surrounding terrain, vegetation, or atmospheric clutter becomes considerably more challenging. Altitude makes detection even harder. Instead of flying thousands of meters above the ground, many long-range drones remain only tens of meters above forests, rivers, and rolling terrain. At these altitudes, the curvature of the Earth itself limits radar visibility. Every hill becomes potential cover. Every valley becomes another corridor. Every tree line becomes another opportunity to remain hidden until the final stages of flight. Modern navigation technology amplifies these advantages. Rather than relying exclusively on satellite navigation, which can be disrupted through electronic warfare, many systems increasingly combine inertial measurement units, terrain reference databases, and optical navigation. Instead of asking satellites where they are, these drones compare the landscape beneath them with preloaded digital maps, constantly adjusting their position throughout the mission. Artificial intelligence further expands these capabilities. Machine vision algorithms can recognize rivers, roads, coastlines, and urban layouts, enabling autonomous corrections even in electronically contested environments. The result is a weapon that requires remarkably little external communication after launch. This presents defenders with a difficult problem. Electronic warfare can disrupt communications. It can interfere with satellite signals. It can jam certain frequencies. But autonomous navigation reduces dependence on all three. Every technological improvement forces defenders to spend proportionally more resources simply to maintain the same level of protection. And that's before considering the economics. An interceptor missile may cost hundreds of thousands, or even millions, of pounds depending on the system and the missile employed. A long-range strike drone can cost only a small fraction of that amount. When dozens of drones appear simultaneously, the financial equation begins to favor the attacker. The battlefield is no longer simply measuring military power. It is measuring industrial endurance. And that may prove to be the defining military competition of the 21st century. Technology alone does not determine the outcome of war. Logistics does. Every radar vehicle requires trained crews. Every launcher depends on maintenance teams. Every interceptor fired must eventually be replaced, transported, and integrated back into the network. Unlike the drones they are trying to destroy, advanced surface-to-air missile systems cannot be manufactured quickly or deployed everywhere at once. That reality creates a problem that no military planner wants to face. If you cannot defend every critical location, which ones do you protect? Modern integrated air defense systems were never designed to create an impenetrable shield over an entire nation. Instead, they concentrate protection around assets considered indispensable: government centers, military headquarters, strategic air bases, industrial facilities, and nuclear infrastructure. As long as attacks remained relatively limited, this approach was manageable. Large-scale drone campaigns changed the equation. Instead of threatening one or two high-value locations, inexpensive drones can pressure dozens of targets across an enormous geographical area. Oil refineries, fuel depots, logistics hubs, ammunition storage sites, aircraft maintenance facilities and command centers may all require protection simultaneously. Every new target stretches the defensive network further. Military planners often describe this as a resource allocation problem rather than a purely technological one. A launcher positioned to defend one region cannot simultaneously defend another hundreds of kilometers away. Reinforcing one area inevitably reduces protection somewhere else. The result is a continuous process of prioritization. This is where economics begins to shape strategy. Imagine a defender confronted with repeated drone attacks against infrastructure spread across thousands of kilometers. Interceptors may successfully destroy many incoming threats, but each engagement consumes missiles that require time and industrial capacity to replace. The attacker, meanwhile, may continue producing relatively inexpensive drones at a much faster pace. Over months rather than days, the pressure becomes cumulative. The challenge is no longer winning a single engagement. It is sustaining the defense indefinitely. That is why modern military analysts increasingly argue that drone warfare is as much an industrial contest as a battlefield contest. Factories become as important as front lines. Production rates become as important as battlefield tactics. Supply chains become as important as weapon performance. This broader perspective also explains why military planners pay close attention to strategic industrial facilities. Shipyards, aircraft factories, missile production plants and specialized engineering complexes are not simply manufacturing sites. They are the foundation upon which long-term military capability depends. If production slows, replacement slows. If replacement slows, operational flexibility gradually declines. Among Russia's most strategically significant industrial assets is the Sevmash shipyard in Syeverodvinsk. Unlike many conventional naval facilities, Sevmash occupies a unique position within Russia's defense industrial base because it constructs and modernizes nuclear-powered submarines, some of the country's most strategically important naval assets. These submarines contribute to the sea-based component of Russia's nuclear deterrent, giving them significance that extends far beyond conventional naval operations. Protecting infrastructure of this importance is therefore not merely a local concern. It forms part of maintaining long-term strategic capability. Yet protecting every critical facility across a country spanning 11 time zones is an extraordinary challenge. Military resources are finite. Personnel are finite. Interceptor inventories are finite. Even the most advanced radar systems possess physical limitations imposed by geography, terrain, and the Earth's curvature. As pressure on defensive networks increases, commanders may be forced to reassess where their most capable systems provide the greatest overall strategic value. That does not necessarily imply weakness. It reflects an enduring reality of military planning. Every deployment carries an opportunity cost. Strengthening one sector almost always means accepting greater risk somewhere else. History repeatedly demonstrates that wars are rarely won by eliminating risk altogether. Instead, commanders continually decide which risks they believe are manageable, and which risks they simply cannot afford to take. The difficulty, of course, is that these calculations depend on assumptions about the future. What appears to be an acceptable level of risk today may prove dangerously optimistic tomorrow. Modern drone warfare has introduced a level of uncertainty that many Cold War doctrines never anticipated. Instead of preparing primarily for fast aircraft and ballistic missiles, air defense planners must now account for persistent, low-cost, autonomous threats capable of appearing from multiple directions with little warning. That shift is forcing militaries around the world, not just Russia, to rethink how they balance technology, geography, and economics. Because in the age of autonomous drones, the most valuable air defense system may no longer be the one with the longest range. It may be the one that allows commanders to preserve enough resources to fight again tomorrow. When most people think about military competition, they picture the trenches of eastern Ukraine, the waters of the Black Sea, or the skies above major cities. But some of the world's most strategically important military infrastructure lies thousands of kilometers to the north. The Arctic is often portrayed as an empty wilderness of ice, snow, and isolated settlements. From a military perspective, however, it is one of the most valuable regions on Earth. For Russia, the Arctic represents far more than geography. It is a launch point for strategic naval operations, a hub for energy exports, and home to infrastructure that underpins a significant portion of its long-term military capability. One of the region's defining characteristics is access. Unlike fleets based in enclosed seas, submarines operating from Russia's northern coast can eventually reach the North Atlantic through a limited number of maritime corridors. These routes have shaped military planning for decades because they determine how naval forces move between home waters and the wider ocean. During the Cold War, both NATO and the Soviet Union invested enormous resources in monitoring these approaches. Underwater sensor networks, maritime patrol aircraft, and attack submarines all formed part of an ongoing contest to detect each other's movements without triggering direct conflict. Although the geopolitical landscape has changed, the underlying geography has not. The same narrow sea lanes remain strategically significant today. For that reason, northern naval infrastructure carries importance far beyond regional defense. It supports submarine construction, maintenance, logistics, and deployment, activities that cannot simply be relocated overnight if disrupted. Modern nuclear-powered submarines are among the most complex machines ever built. Their construction involves specialized metallurgy, precision engineering, advanced electronics, nuclear reactor technology, and highly skilled labor accumulated over decades. Replacing that industrial expertise would be measured not in months, but in years. This is where economics and strategy intersect once again. Even without direct physical damage, maintaining production has become increasingly challenging in an era of international sanctions and export controls. Many advanced manufacturing processes rely on specialized machine tools capable of producing components with microscopic precision. Equally important are sophisticated electronic systems, high-performance sensors, and industrial equipment that often depend upon globally integrated supply chains. When access to those supply chains becomes restricted, manufacturers are forced to identify alternative suppliers, redesign production processes, or develop domestic substitutes. All three options consume time. Time, however, is one resource that defense planners rarely possess in abundance. A submarine delayed by 1 year affects fleet planning. multiple delays begin influencing long-term force structure. The consequences extend far beyond a single vessel. Naval modernization programs are built like interconnected chains. Delays affecting one class of submarine can influence maintenance schedules, crew training, deployment cycles and procurement decisions across an entire fleet. That is why industrial resilience has become a military capability in its own right. The war in Ukraine has highlighted that modern conflict is no longer fought exclusively by soldiers on battlefields. It is also fought by engineers, logistics specialists, factory workers and supply chain managers. Success increasingly depends upon which side can sustain production while absorbing continual economic and military pressure. Meanwhile, technological innovation continues moving faster than traditional procurement cycles. Defensive systems that required decades to develop now face threats that evolve in only a few years. Artificial intelligence improves autonomy. Commercial electronics become more capable. Navigation algorithms grow more sophisticated. Manufacturing techniques become cheaper and more widely available. Every improvement reduces the cost of creating effective unmanned systems while increasing the burden placed upon defenders. This dynamic has attracted the attention of military planners well beyond Europe. Across Asia, the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific, defense ministries are investing heavily in layered air defense architectures that combine long-range missile batteries with electronic warfare, passive sensors, counter-drone systems and inexpensive interceptors designed specifically for unmanned aircraft. The lesson emerging from recent conflicts is becoming increasingly clear. No single weapon system, regardless of how advanced, can solve the drone problem alone. Instead, survival depends upon integrating multiple layers of detection, electronic attack and interception into a network capable of adapting faster than the threat itself. That represents a profound departure from the assumptions that shaped air defense doctrine throughout much of the 20th century. The age of relying primarily on a handful of extremely capable missile systems is giving way to an era defined by distributed sensing, artificial intelligence and cost-efficient defense. In many respects, the competition is no longer about building the most expensive shield. It is about building the smartest one. And that raises perhaps the most important question of all. If inexpensive autonomous systems continue improving faster than traditional air defense networks can adapt, are we witnessing a temporary imbalance created by one conflict? Or are we watching the birth of an entirely new era of warfare, one in which military power is measured not by the price of individual weapons, but by the ability to outthink, outproduce and outlast an opponent? For nearly half a century, the foundation of modern air defense rested on a relatively straightforward principle. Build better radars. Build faster missiles. Build longer engagement ranges. If an adversary launched an aircraft or missile, detect it first, engage it early and destroy it before it reached its objective. That doctrine worked because the threats it was designed to defeat were themselves expensive. A strategic bomber represented an enormous investment. A cruise missile required advanced engineering. Even precision-guided munitions demanded sophisticated manufacturing capabilities. The defender might spend millions protecting critical infrastructure, but the attacker was making an equally significant investment. Today's drone revolution has fundamentally altered that equation. Instead of relying exclusively on a handful of exceptionally capable weapons, militaries can now deploy hundreds, or potentially thousands, of comparatively inexpensive autonomous systems. Some serve as reconnaissance platforms. Others conduct electronic warfare. Some act as decoys, deliberately drawing defensive fire before the main strike arrives. Others carry explosive payloads large enough to damage critical infrastructure. Collectively, they create a level of operational complexity that traditional air defense doctrine was never designed to confront. The objective is no longer simply to penetrate an air defense network. It is to overwhelm its decision-making process. Every unidentified radar contact demands attention. Every potential threat requires evaluation. Every interceptor launched reduces future defensive capacity. The defender is forced into a constant cycle of difficult decisions, while the attacker seeks to impose continuous pressure at the lowest possible cost. Military strategists sometimes describe this as a cost imposition strategy. Rather than defeating an opponent through superior firepower alone, the goal is to compel them to spend disproportionately more resources responding to each successive attack. If one inexpensive drone causes an adversary to expend a highly sophisticated interceptor, the exchange may represent a tactical success regardless of whether the drone survives. Repeated hundreds of times, these exchanges begin reshaping military budgets, procurement priorities, and industrial planning. No country is immune to this challenge. The United States is investing heavily in counter-drone technologies. European nations are accelerating integrated air defense programs. China is expanding layered defensive systems while simultaneously advancing its own unmanned capabilities. Middle Eastern militaries continue adapting after years of confronting drone and missile attacks against critical infrastructure. The lessons emerging from recent conflicts are influencing defense planners across the globe. Future air defense networks are unlikely to depend on a single family of missiles. Instead, they will combine long-range interceptors with electronic warfare, passive sensors, directed energy weapons, automated command systems and lower-cost interceptors designed specifically for unmanned threats. Artificial intelligence will almost certainly play an increasingly central role, not only in controlling drones, but also in helping defenders prioritize targets, fuse sensor data and allocate limited resources in real time. In many ways, the contest has become a race between two forms of automation. One side seeks to automate attack. The other seeks to automate defense. Whichever evolves faster may shape the character of warfare for decades to come. Looking back, future historians may not remember this period primarily for the individual battles or the territory gained and lost. They may remember it as the moment military doctrine itself changed. The moment when relatively inexpensive autonomous systems proved capable of challenging defensive concepts developed over generations. The moment when industrial capacity became just as important as battlefield tactics. And the moment when the economics of warfare became inseparable from the technology driving it. History has repeatedly shown that every major military innovation eventually forces established powers to adapt. The tank reshaped land warfare. Aircraft transformed strategic bombing. Precision-guided weapons changed conventional conflict. Now, autonomous drones may be writing the next chapter. Whether the world's militaries can adapt quickly enough remains uncertain. But one conclusion is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The future of air defense will not belong solely to the side with the most advanced missiles. It will belong to the side that can combine technology, industry, innovation and affordability into a system capable of surviving an age where the cheapest weapon on the battlefield may force the most expensive decisions. And that leaves one final question. Are we witnessing a temporary evolution in military technology? Or has the era of billion-pound defensive shields already given way to an age where intelligence, adaptability and cost efficiency matter more than raw firepower?